What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. I have hosted and produced over 2,000 epic conversations over the last 10 years. And what makes our conversations epic? We don't do interviews. We do conversations. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Also, I'm a certified empowerment coach and also president of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And for those who don't know what Tuesday nights are all about, you're going to get the real deal on what a Tuesday night should be and is all about. I'm going to make it short and sweet because I want these two gentlemen to be the stars of the show like they always are, rightfully, when they come on the platform. Tuesday nights, we do a regular conversation for men and those who love them. And for a period of time, I had the blessing and the esteemed pleasure of having both these gentlemen be the tip of the spear in these conversations. They're gone on to do bigger, better, and bolder things. But they did say to me before they went away that, one, they wanted me to continue the conversation, and two, they said every once in a while they would come back on. So my begging has finally come to fruition, and I've got some results from all my begging. I can get off my knees now. So I'm very blessed and highly favored to have Glenn Barker back and also Dr. Marvin Thompson back. I'll let them introduce themselves and tell us what they've been up to since we've last had them on the platform. So who wants to go first?
Dr. Thompson.
Days before beauty. I knew he was going to do that. Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Dr. Marvin Thompson. I am president of EmpowerEd LLC, which is an educational consulting company working with low-performing schools in the country. I also sponsor a educational foundation, which literally works with at-risk youth and challenged communities. And I host a weekly radio podcast called In the Bullpen with Dr. T, and we focus on issues related to schools, families, and communities.
And I'm Glenn Barker of the Man. That's pretty good. You're getting that down. You're very good.
That's quick, man.
Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project out here in Chicago. And we're a 30-year nonprofit that has really focused exclusively on men and those things that challenge men through the times and challenges of their lives. We have 40 centers. We've had 50,000 men go through our training, 700 men's groups. And I myself have been trying to expand the work beyond our what was once just a referral membership into going into cities and towns and other areas to launch new small centers. And this has been a pilot program I'm very proud of. And so if you and your community, by the end of this talk, would like to see a men's group started in your town and your community, get a hold of us and we can help. So thank you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Absolutely. And before we go any further, I just want to shout out at Ebony Renee. Also want to shout out at Vilma Benacourt. Also Sandy Sanders, long time no chat. Good to have you back. And also haven't seen before at Paz Simpson. Thanks for stopping by. The basic way we go about this is we let Glenn just weave his magic wand. So haven't had the pleasure of saying it, Glenn. The next move is up to you, so go ahead.
All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And like we like to say, we like to not only inform, but to help educate. So I do hope you get something out of tonight. We ask you to join us. Tonight we're going to talk about transparency. And what do we mean by transparency? We hear this in politics and we hear this in our lives. What is it to be transparent? And what's at risk? Because, you know, transparency means opening up and letting everybody see inside. So there's times when that's the right thing to do, and when it's connected to your integrity. There's a time when it's not okay to do. How do you decide? When is it a deception, and when is it protection? So what I like to do is just put that premise out there, and maybe open the conversation to say, Dr. Thompson, with a question. I know you've been challenged throughout your life many times. Should I be transparent? Should I not be? How do you choose? How do you reconcile? And how do you make it the difference in your mind between what's a deception and what's protection?
Well, I think, I said earlier that this was a perfect topic. And I think when we look at everything that's happening in our society, there's the issue of transparency is always the question. I mean, that's why we have debates, and debates continue, because I think there's an underlying premise that someone's being transparent or someone isn't being transparent. So this topic really transcends just the interpersonal relationships, but it's a global concept in almost everything that we do. And there's always a risk in transparency because you're exposing yourself in terms of motive. And if your motives don't always align with those that you're seeking to be transparent to, you open yourself to be manipulated. And I think that's the risk of being transparent for some people. There's so many different layers to what transparency means, but I think a lot of it does come down to what is your basic motive for whatever it is that you're after. And, you know, we can't always choose those that we do business with. We can't always choose those that we work with. And I think when we are locked into those situations where we don't have a selection process, that issue of transparency really expands itself, because now you're tied to someone whom you did not choose, who you're locked in with, and transparency becomes an ongoing component of the relationship. So there's always a risk, and that risk, again, is tied to motives and goals. I think those two things always, and motives and goals are definitely separate. Trust me, they're definitely separate, but they definitely butt up against transparency quite often.
Dr. Vibe, how do you describe transparency in your vocabulary? And how is it used, Dr. Vibe?
Wow. Before I go there, I'd just like to shout out, thanks for Isabel Sanchez for joining in. Thanks to Tiffany Rochelle, also Jason Hodge. And there is a seat open. So if anyone would like to join the conversation, you're more than welcome to, and you can always join in on the side. How to describe transparency? Allowing the real you to be felt. That's how I'm not going to be any long on that. I just say you want to make sure that your real you is felt. And I see Jason has come in, so we already have someone. See, you guys come back. The floodgates are already open. Hey, Jason, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, Doc?
Doing fine. We don't usually let people in early, but you know what? These guys are special, so I'm bringing it in early. So I don't know if you had a chance to hear the question that Glenn asked, but Glenn asked the question.
Well, welcome to the show, Jason. Thanks for jumping on. The discussion tonight will be around transparency, and there's all kinds of applications. How do you view, when you use the word, okay, be transparent, or I'm going to be transparent, what's the situation? How do you view that? Give me some context. How do you use the word? What are you expecting when you use or hear the word transparency?
Well, for me, transparency, it comes into being honest with myself. I think a lot of times we take into consideration far too much other people's thought process on what we say or what we do without first checking in with home base and saying, is this in alignment with who I am? So for me, transparency is really getting down to foundational core things and seeing if it is on target or off target with what it is that I believe. I hope that answered that question, but it's really being honest with myself and then not concerned with everybody else's thought process on that honesty.
So here's this word transparency. We have 4 different definitions of it because it's kind of how it applies to our lives or what we expect from others. And I'm sure everybody who's on the sidelines is probably doing the same thing. What does it mean to you? And I'd like to lean a little bit into what Dr. Vibe put it. He says it's allowing you to see into me. Let's put it that way. On an interpersonal level, right? My transparency says, am I going to allow you to see into me? So what's at risk on this level of transparency? Dr. Thompson, so if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to be transparent here, I'm going to put it all out on the table. This is what I think, feel, and see. What's at risk? Maybe pick any scenario you choose and say, so what's at risk for you to be transparent?
Well, Well, there's always pushback, but I want to pick up on what Jason was saying. I think he got it right, and it goes back to that motive. Why am I even showing up? What's my purpose for even being here? Because I think that's, for me, where it starts. If you're true to why you're there, then you know what to expect and know what you're expecting. And I think risk become minimal when you're clear about that. I think risk are increased when you're unsure of who you're engaging with, when you're unsure of what the next steps will be, or whatever influence you may have in a situation. So, for example, if it's hard to really come up with one off at the top of my head, but it really just comes down when you look at risk. Know why you're showing up. There is no risk but a yes or a no, especially if you're asking something. So I think for me, the risk are minimized when you are willing to be transparent, when you define how you show up. I think sometimes the risk is assumed by other people, not so much by you. I think that's because you don't have control over how they'll respond, and not everybody's open to transparency, because transparency is often
How do you mean that?
manipulated.
Explore that a little more.
Yeah, go
into
on.
that a little more.
I think that's
good. No, just quickly,
Good,
I love
Dr.
what
Bob,
you
you wanted
said
to
there,
jump in?
Dr. T, about when you're authentic with yourself, the risk is not on you, it's on the other people. I think that's a really powerful statement, but continue on. I think that's a great take.
Well, and see, this is the dynamic of relationships, and I think Jason was alluding to it, because when you start getting to other people's thoughts, you miss the part about what you own when you step to the plate in the first place, wherever you enter. And that's why you got to own it. You become the filter for what you hear. So that transparency, you're constantly evaluating based on what you brought to the table. And if you felt you were being honest, even when you get pushback, even when your words or your intentions and your motives get moved around, you're able to hold your ground. So I think the risk is conflict. I think the risk is manipulation. I think the risk is rejection. So to me, those are all the components that go into, as I started earlier, this transparency issue. It's not just the interpersonal relationships that we have in our workplace and our families and our, spousal relationships, but it's a global concept in almost everything that we do.
Very good. So I'll now speak to what's at risk when it comes to being transparent. Because if I'm going to be transparent, that means I'm also going to risk showing you my motives, right? So if we come from a place where Dr. Thompson says, yes, they're all pure and they're all, you came from a great place, but that's not always my motive. If my motive is to position myself, that can be construed as being manipulative, right? And so to be transparent means to risk criticism, right? To risk I have my motives exposed, and I've got to explain myself. See, if I become transparent, then I become accountable.
Right.
Let me know when I can
If
jump
I become
in on
transparent, go ahead, Jason.
that. Okay, because the thing is that when you talk about the motives may not always be pure. Pure is a very subjective term, because, for example, if my motives are to position myself, but if I'm very clear and upfront about that, then it's not unpure for me to position myself. The reason for my conversation, the reason for our engagement right now is because I want to do A, B, and C. So if I am upfront with you about that, if I'm transparent about that, then the only thing you can do, you may not necessarily like my candor, but you've got to respect that I'm not trying to give you or manipulate the situation. I think what happens is that, and I see this a lot of time in sales and in marketing, is that there's so much effort that is put into manipulating the audience as opposed to being very clear on what it is they're getting. And because of that, what ends up happening is that people get a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to sales and things like that, when it comes to business building activities, or when it comes to life building activities, because they think that there's something wrong with stating exactly what you want. And there's nothing wrong with that. So if I'm going to be transparent with you and say, okay, so, the reason for this meeting is A, B, and C, then that gives you the wherewithal to say, okay, I'm willing to engage on that note, or I'm not. And if you're not, no harm, no foul, at least you knew where I was coming from. if you do engage, you already know what the game plan is, why I'm here. Now, the question is why are you here?
So I want to unpack this a little bit, Dr. Thompson. Pull these pieces apart, because I think if motives are pure, and like Jason says, if you have clarity and you're able to take responsibility for your position, there is no embarrassment. There's no risk, really, except for the inquiry or to examine your motives. And if you're pure, great. So why aren't people? Let me put it this way: why aren't people transparent, Dr. Thompson?
Well, you said it before. There's always a threat to it. There's fear. Transparency means people have to act. I mean, when you think about it, if whatever's being exchanged and you're being transparent, every conversation is a thought. It's an idea that's going to lead to an action. I mean, simple as that. And if we understand that dynamic in every encounter, there's a risk. So I think there's an underlying component to this, and one of them is integrity.
Okay, I thought it was me because I was going through trees. Okay.
No.
Yeah, motives and goals are two separate things, and we talked about purity. Jason's example of his approach, knowing what he wanted, and the goal was to move up, right? So the motive is an interpersonal one with people, but the goal was to move up. So they are definitely two separate things. So I think the transparency in that is being real, number one, about what it is that you're after. And you all know those water cooler conversations. I think he's after the boss's job. I think he's after this. Ain't no question. I want to move up. There's no doubt about that. And hard work and good effort and all of those things, they go in hand. But the risk of transparency is manipulation. We keep coming back to it. It all circles back to integrity. I think there's an underlying thing that transparency is wrapped in. We keep using the word transparency, but when you finish it, it literally comes down to integrity. Yeah. And we've discussed this many times. That integrity is tied to being honest with yourself and what who you are when you show up. And then the second part is how you show up.
So Dr. Vibe, in your estimation, why aren't folks transparent? How come our politicians? How come when are you not transparent?
I want to even funnel it down more specifically to men, why many men aren't transparent. And I think one of them is fear. Another thing is ego. Maybe another reason too is people haven't seen or felt transparency, because most people learn through duplication. So if they don't feel that they've seen it or been around it, they have no impetus to do it. So I think those are some of the reasons specifically why men, and again, some men may feel that transparency is weakness, when really transparency is strength.
And
let me put something out. I'll put out. Want to say something, Dr. Thompson? Please do.
Yeah. No, I think, the hardest thing for men that I find is to say, I don't know and I can't. So that's the level of transparency that I see and hear quite often in men, and we fake it till we make it sometimes. And when we get caught, or we're afraid we're about to get caught, we push back. And I think that's how sometimes as men we limit ourselves to growing in our transparency.
Bit, right? Let's unpack that. I don't know if I'm freezing or if you guys can hear me or not. Let me know.
But you're okay.
Okay, let's unpack that, because we talk about men and the lack of transparency and all of that, and the fear or not wanting to say, hey, I don't know, but if we were to boil that down, what is that fear? I mean, I believe that it's the fear of rejection, and based on what we have been societally told that not knowing something is going to mean. Okay, that's one thing. Another thing is that, looking less than, again, back down to rejection. Well, if you look less than, what's the outcome of that? The outcome of that is rejection once again, because If you're less than, then you're not the creme de la creme. You know, you're not the pick of the crop. So you are passed over and somebody else is chosen. So you've got to look at it from that perspective of, if we handle that deficit where there's that fear of rejection, if we can handle that and then say, you know what, so long as I accept myself and am very secure in who I am, then who can actually reject me if I don't reject myself first? But we don't take it there first. We always put it on the outside. And I'm just talking about people in general, which I think is the motivating factor of why we do most of the things that we do. It is to save face because we don't want to be rejected. We don't want to look less than.
Before you go on, Glenn, I just want to add some comments at Tiffany Rochelle. One, she's saying we have a culture that has been built on the ideas of manhood and womanhood that has been replicated to a fault. She also says transparency is also freedom. And one other thing she did have to add is we lose transparency when we are not God's, I think she meant to say centered. We lose faith and embrace doubt. Doubt leads to all the other negative emotions, fear, envy, jealousy, etc. So I just wanted to catch up. And also the roles of women and views of what we are to do have changed significantly, yet the roles of men have not been revised much.
Well, and also we've got to look at it just from a cultural standpoint. We tend to, especially inside of the Americas, we melt everybody into the quote unquote melting pot without taking into consideration, you know, how different peoples of the different regions of the world think and take in their roles inside of their society. So societal norms are not really all that normal. So we are having things that are portrayed on us that aren't necessarily the same things that we all ascribe to, just based on historical data.
Okay, we're hoping to get Dr. T back in, but Glenn, continue on.
So I spend a lot of time with a lot of men over a lot of years. And so in a perfect world, when all of our motives are pure, this piece about transparency works fine, and it's a great place to stay in integrity, because if I'm in integrity and I can own my integrity, my reasoning, I have nothing to defend. You want me to lay it all out? This is the way I feel. This is the way I take this stand. Yet on the other side of that, there is something real that still impacts a lot of men, and that is, let's just say it, it's the shitstorm. You open up your mouth, you say what you got to say, you be transparent, and what you're going to put up with is that shitstorm coming your way, right? So this is reality. So if I want to pull it out of the platitudes and move it into what we really deal with in a way as men, and some of it is so what happens is we go into what's called shadow, and as we get close to this piece, what I see often in men is one or two things happen. Like Jason said, you get pushback. Okay, get out of my face. The other thing is, the other opposite end of that is to be slippery. Try to nail Jello to the wall. Right? So now you know you're right up against what we call shadow. Right? And so to be forthcoming, to be transparent, is many times what's at risk is facing the shitstorm. And if you don't feel emotionally equipped, or you have the right language, or you have the right motives, or you're questioning your motives, or maybe they're not great motives. Maybe it's, you know what, because that's what I want, because I'm trying to get my needs met, and they're selfish, and that's not okay to be selfish. So if we can drop the altruistic, pure thinking and say the truth of it are, in many ways, I'm a very selfish, right, man. And if I ask for what I need, this could be risky for me, right? And if I really push back or be transparent about how I feel, I got to face a shitstorm, right? Especially in interpersonal relationships. And so what do? I avoid. Either I push back and say, get out of my face now. Or I get slippery, I do a dance, and you can't nail me down, and this whole thing goes sideways, and it comes back other ways. So let's get real.
And can you describe that storm?
Okay, for me, describe the shit storm means if you're going to open up your mouth with your spouse, right, and say what you really got to say, to be transparent about the way you're going to feel, take a big bag of shit and throw it to the fan. What happens? It's a shitstorm coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of men I know they avoid that, right? So what do? They don't say nothing. They're not transparent. They get slippery, or they say, "Get out of my face, back off."
Mm-hmm.
So there's a risk in transparency, men. And the truth of it is, how do you face your shitstorm? Because it just ain't convenient. Your transparency ain't convenient. Your truth ain't convenient, especially if it isn't all high-minded. It's because you wanted what you wanted, and you took it.
Right.
This is getting
I
real.
just before
Have you ever done
just
something
before-
like that?
Yeah, I'm looking at what Tiffany wrote down there. It says, men do not like confrontation. I tell women this often. If we speak to men in confrontational ways, we can expect them to do anything to avoid the confrontation.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
now this.
To tell you the truth, I don't know anybody who likes confrontation. Okay. But there is a matter of who is willing to deal with the confrontation. And I think it takes a special kind of person, a man or a woman, who is going to deal with the confrontation if they look down the road and see that that confrontation is not going to have a positive outcome. You know?
Jason, people are getting in your car. Do you know that?
I could understand that storm that you speak of.
Yeah, Jason knows that. That's the norm for him. Man, that's the norm. That's the norm. Jason's got so much going on. No, you notice he was driving it and blah. I don't prescribe people to do, but he does it.
Just thought I'd mention that. Yeah.
That's why I don't look at the screen when I'm doing what I'm doing.
Okay, but I just want to continue on here. Paz Simpson saying, living in faith, staying in gratitude helps us in a place where we can embrace transparency. And then Tiffany Rochelle said, most people don't, but women can work in a little bit better than men. Watch reality shows. They're almost all women, unfortunately.
But you realize, though, that reality storms are very far from real. Right?
True.
That is all. It is beefed up for the ratings and for the ad spend. So it has nothing to do with reality.
So let's get out of the reality show business and get back to the transparency business. Glenn, lead on. Or Dr. T, do you have anything you'd like to add on? Because you haven't shared for a few moments.
Dr. Thompson, I want to move on to the next section unless you're ready.
Well, the last things that we talked about and how to deal with the transparency. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think there's a delay.
Go ahead, Dr. Thompson. No problem.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think that at some point, when you're transparent, I've just learned, when I work with young people and they talk about he said, she said, and they move into agendas, I always ask them to take other people at face value. You can't be accountable for somebody else's lack of transparency, but you can hold their ass accountable to their lack of transparency. I think a lot of the conflicts that I've dealt with young people, they occur at the very beginning of any dynamic relationship, right? Wherever they're moving into. And I always just tell them, is that what he said to you? Yeah, good. Then hold his ass accountable to what the hell he just said. Let your transparency reveal itself along the way. The only thing you have to be true to is your motive and your level of transparency. I think sometimes we like to hold other people accountable. I think that's where conflict comes into to our level of expected, the level of transparency we're providing. We assume and expect others to do it. And that's where the conflict comes in.
Okay. I get the gist of what
he's saying. I think the next level of that transparency is learning how, one, to maintain your integrity about your transparency. And then hold others accountable for their
Go ahead, Glenn.
So yes, a lack of transparency. Now I'm going to go right into it for me. I pick and choose when I'm going to be transparent because to me I have to feel safe. If I'm going to be 100% forthcoming and transparent, it's going to be in a container or in such circumstance where there's somewhat of an agreement about how we're going to conduct ourselves. So I personally do not go out there being transparent about everything. For the same reason that Dr. Thompson talked about, which is because it can be used as a weapon against you. So I think if you're smart, you choose your times and you choose your conditions. You go, yes, I want to bring accountability to this piece, to this conduct, to this thing, whatever it is, in myself or someone else. It's like rules of engagement. Okay, so I'm going to open up. I'm going to avail of myself for my motives, for my motivation, for my thinking, and I have an ask. I say, you're going to judge anyway, but if you use it as a weapon against me, we're done. It's over.
Yep.
And I'm going to shut down, and I'm not going to trust you. Yeah, but I'm saying with my motives and my feelings, right?
Agreed.
Jason, I can hear you want to talk.
Yeah, no, that's good, because you do have to take all of that into consideration, and you need to know what level of engagement that person that you're engaging with in, where they are with you. If you are a deep conversation, deep engagement, then you can go there. If it's superficial, they may not have the capacity to deal with your transparency. So therefore, you leave it superficial, and you know that that's not the depth of waters that you're going to tread in with them, you know. And you really do have to pick and choose who you do that with, and you can't do that with everybody. So I totally agree.
Thank you, Jason. So you think it comes down to trust? In a big way, Jason?
I think
absolutely.
I think absolutely. No, go ahead, Jason. Go ahead, Jason. I'll add on to what you have to say. I think
not only trust, but you have to, you know, how it's said that communication is 5% verbal and 95% nonverbal, body language and all that. You've got to be open to reading the communication that goes beyond just what their mouth is saying. You know, they may say, oh yeah, you know, it's a safe place and all of that. Everything else is telling you, no, it's not. And so you have to be wise when it comes to that. You know, so I would say that it's important. It's important in business. It's important in relationships. In business, you can't necessarily, you know, bare your soul all the time, because it's not necessarily the most appropriate thing. That could be the difference between a closed deal. You know. Exactly. So you have to understand how to read the signs and the seasons. Sometimes it is the right person, just the wrong time. So you need to know the nuances to understand or to ascertain when those things, you know, are relevant or not.
Dr. Thompson, how do you gauge when if you agree that there's a degree of safety, dignity, or rules that have to be in place before you can be so forthcoming? What are your rules of engagement when it comes down to transparency, Dr. Thompson? When could you really say you're going to see it all, the good, bad, the ugly, the beautiful, all of it? What, you have rules of engagement?
Yeah, I think it's due, and it's unique to every situation. But I can tell you when I'm working with families, when there's a threat involved, when someone's going down the wrong road, and if I'm not transparent about either with what the next step will be, what either is going to happen to them, whatever the consequences are going to be, or whatever path they've set on that they think they've convinced me of. I think those are the times where I have to be transparent, when it's not beneficial to them or me. You could lead people. I think I mentioned earlier about accountability for other people's transparency. You have to know when it shows up and butts up against your agenda, your motive, your goal. And if your goal is transparent, and it always has been, it's not a big problem to confront someone on something you've been truthful about the entire time. And that's why I've never had a problem holding other people accountable for their lack of transparency. I've also found that transparency threatens other people, particularly when they're not.
I'm going to ask Dr. Thompson. What he says is always so.
And if they've been in an environment or in a culture,
reset his internet connection or something.
If you're in an environment,
I'm hearing every third word from Dr. Thompson.
Yeah, I don't know, Dr. Thompson. I'm going to click you off and come back on.
Reset your connection.
Yeah, reset. Let's come back on.
He gives such great insight. I want to have him. I want to hear him.
One of the things I just want to add, Glenn, before Dr. T comes back on, the whole aspect. It's interesting if you look at all the conversations that we've had together, all three of us on Blab, and some of the groundbreaking admissions from men. Like, you know, perfect example. Look at Tony. Remember Tony when he came on?
Yeah.
And that was I'll never forget that moment. It was so powerful. And for men especially, it's not only trust, but it's also environment.
Yeah.
You have to they have to have that environment where they feel that they can be themselves. A lot of men of color will talk one way outside of the barbershop and another way inside the barbershop. It's that the trust factor has to be there and the environment has to be there.
Yeah.
And I just use men of color as an example, but it's right across the spectrum of men of all colors. The environment has to be there also.
Yeah.
You know, we've been very blessed that we've provided an environment here where men can be open on what they talk about because of trust and environment.
I absolutely agree, and it comes down to safety, and that's what it comes down for almost every man I ever met. Jason, that's when we're talking about conditions. That's what we're talking about. What makes it okay? Trust. Really, it's about safety. So if I'm going to open up and say, here's my motives, here's my thinking. If I don't trust, right, and if I don't feel safe with Jason and with Dr. Vibe here, I'm not saying anything. My armor goes up, right? I'm watching what I'm exposing because that it feels unsafe to me. And so you go to the barbershop. Everyone now, like you said, the conditions. It's a new normal when you walk in the barbershop. Guys are talking real. Okay? And a couple brave men are really walking into some areas that are very tough to walk into, but they do it with courage. Right? Not with malice, say with courage. And I think courage is the greatest contagion men have for each other. They get around other courageous men. They want to emulate that. If they get around cowards, they emulate the cowards. If they get around snakes and slippery men, they adapt. They adapt to their environment. So part of my quest, we'll see if Jason and Dr. Vibe agrees, that it's for us to model, not just. That's why I want to get past the platitudes about the preaching part of this and say, what is it that we have to own as men? And like for me, if you're going to want me to be transparent, I better feel safe. And I'm going to give you the conditions, what it takes for me to feel safe. And if I'm not, I don't trust you. If I don't trust you, I'm not giving you the weapon. That weapon that could be used against me. No, thank you. I'm smarter than that. Now, other conditions, right? But I'm going to be, as a grown man, no, I have to be the first one to open the door, right? And say, okay, I'm going to talk about some things here that are important to me. I'm going to trust that we're going to keep this in confidence, right? If we do, and I can feel it, like Jason says, your spider sense is out there, you're going to get worked, right? Is someone working you? You assess all that stuff, right? And if you feel, no, I'm with people with dignity here, right? Okay, I'll take a risk. And I'll go so far, and then I'm going to feel it. And then I will gauge what I'm going to do next. And especially for men. I think for men it has to be safe because the wounding is so severe. The shaming is so severe. The rejection is so severe.
Yep.
The consequences are so severe. The conditions have to be right. Jason? What do you think about this?
You know what? Before Jason, just before Jason jumps in, there's yes, there is some incredible communication going on in the text section. So I just want to catch up on it just quickly. At Tiffany Rochelle says, "You are not an anomaly, but you are an exception. The reason being that most people do not know how to confront with love." Another person's jumping on. You know what? I'm just gonna let people on because this is really flying, and I don't want to take up time from people coming in to join the conversation. So, everyone who's communicate on the side, keep it up. There's some great stuff going on. Hello, Paz.
Hello, brothers. I just had to come out. Hey, Paz, how you doing? We're speaking about transparency, but we're also talking about safety. There's no real safety in being transparent. If we're keeping ourselves in a place where we're God-centered, why do we need to be safe by man? You know, what I loved about what Dr. Vibe said when he started this show is I am blessed and highly favored. You know, that is how I address everyone. If someone asks me how I'm feeling at any moment, it's always blessed and highly favored. So we're blessed and highly favored, and we're living in a place where we're feeling that feeling, right? Why are we looking for safety for man? Transparency is who we are. Living in authenticity allows us to always deal with love. If we speak with love, it doesn't matter. You know, one of the things I say is if we speak from our heart, we'll never mind.
That's good. Okay, but can I
like that.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jason. You go first. So I have something. I know Glenn has something. I know Jason. So Jason, you go ahead first.
Okay, the first thing is that, you know, it all sounds great. Okay. And I have been a believer for the majority of my life. However, the reality of it is that in life, you have got folks who are wounded, men and women, and they have been wounded by the people who are the closest to them, who have taught them by experience that it is not safe. And therefore, it sounds great to say, yes, why do we need safety? But the fact of the matter is there is an innate need for us to be safe. And so what happens is that we will keep at bay the danger. That is our proclivity as men, to keep and protect the fort, to protect the house, to protect, you know, that is what we come here with. And so to dismiss that or to discount that is to say, well, that portion of our being is not relevant, which it is very much relevant. We needed it for our survival, and still do. So here's the thing, is that when it comes down to it, I know that there is a certain amount of space that you have to keep, you know, others at bay, and there's a certain amount of space that you have to take ownership of your own stuff. I think as men, as we continue to evolve through this process, to take ownership of our feelings in the thing, our stake in certain things, our role in certain things, separate and apart from outside opinion or intervention, that is where we then derive the safety. But it's not because somebody else gave it to us. It is because we have gotten solid in our own foundational stuff to be able to own our safety ourselves. That way it doesn't matter, hey, I can share with you whatever because I'm already good with myself on this issue. The minute, though, that I'm not good with something and then I go and share, now my mechanism goes off like, was that safe to share? So as men, we have to get to that point where we are fully realized, if you will, or actualized in our stuff to be able to now walk the way that you say, pass in that safety. But it's not there yet for the majority of us because there's so much healing that needs to be done.
Yes.
Okay, so that's my statement on that.
Paz, I'm going to kick you out on kindness because I see Dr. Thompson is back and I want to try to get him
Doc in. Let me just give you one last comment, then like Doc in. The one thing I always say is you cannot spell testimony without going through test. So if we're actually giving our testimony, which is really our true authentic self, sharing those tests that got us there, those scares, those fears, those doubts are things that are great for us. And not all men have gotten there. And I agree with you. But I just say, in being transparent is to share those tests that made your testimony. And I'll go back to just in the chat box.
No problem. Thanks very much for making the conversation better. Glenn, I want you to add on to that because
I do.
And I appreciate what Paz says, but the thing is, that's for men that are there.
Yeah.
There's a whole pile of men that are not there that you have dealt with hundreds of men who are not there. So add on to the commentary piece, please.
All right. So Jason has this absolutely right. He's unpacked that wonderfully. Jason, you're spot on every single point. I would make one exception. That's the part that needs to be slowed down, actually. What Jason just spouted in 5 or 6 sentences there is truly kind of the core pieces of men's work. Well, I'll take one exception is we don't, sometimes it's so interpersonal or coming from a wounded place where it needs some objectivity. And then again, that's where I say the men's groups come in for each other. See, with a man like Jason in my life and Dr. Vibe and Dr. Thompson, when we can build a container of safety and I can out those pieces. So now it gets out of my head and out of my shadow and out of my wounded place into a space, right, where I can ferret it out to say what part of that is mixed up in me, what part of it do I got to own, the way you said it, Jason, take ownership of, and what's the impact and consequences of me continuing the same way, or what's the risk of trying to change it? Help me, men, because this is very uncomfortable. I'd rather not look at this. It scares the crap out of me, but it's also messing with me, and I can stay safe and screwed up in the same place, or I could try to move somewhere else and screw it up, and this is my risk. And Jason, I don't know if you're in this work, but you are, no question, in this work.
All right.
No, you got it. Absolutely, you nailed it on. Dr. Thompson, have you been able to be privy to any of this conversation?
No, I probably caught the last minute or so.
Dr. Vibe, would you give a little recap and see if we can get Dr. Thompson, because we were looking for his opinion on.
Well, basically, Paz came on, who's been watching the show, and he said that basically he's saying that, and I'm paraphrasing Paz, if I misquote you or misdirect, please forgive me, but basically that he's saying that men need to look to a higher power, etc., in order to get their transparency. And when they're at that point, they can certainly share it. The only concern is many men are not at that point where they can be transparent. We all know that. Men, I'm sure every man has a moment, even now, even those who say that they're there, because I don't think men are never all there.
Yeah.
That they have those points. Like I say,
you're there for a moment. You're there for a moment.
Exactly. Right. Like I always say, most men are not Superman. They're just Clark Kent having their Superman moments.
Perfect.
That's good.
So, Dr. Thompson, maybe to bring you back into the conversation, hopefully this was recorded really the way Jason really depicted the contrast to the big picture, or just be a better man, I'm enlightened, was to unpack it to say we've been wounded, we are wounded, and we're surrounded by wounded people, and this is a kind of shield that men have. I think it's justified. I think the armor only comes off under certain conditions, to a certain level, to certain people, for certain reasons, under certain times. And I think that's wise. I do not want to be re-wounded by being transparent and being a tool for giving someone the tools that don't have the respect and dignity for me or themselves to not wound me with it. Now that happens once or twice. Now I got even thicker armor. I'm less available. So don't tell me about the place where I'm supposed to come from. Tell me how I'm supposed to handle the things that come at me. The demons from within and the demons from outside. So men, this last few minutes, let's spend on this. We know we can't change the world necessarily by what we do today, but maybe we can change how we react to it. Huh?
Yeah.
That we might have some power over. Jason, how do you change your response to a world? Right? That may be hostile, ignorant, right? Knowing or unknowing, wounded, right?
Yeah.
This is a world. You're not an unaware man. What is it that maybe you learned over some time? What would you share with men about this inner piece about how you respond?
Yeah. For me, it is to keep the lines of communication open, especially when it's uncomfortable, because it's in the discomfort where I find that my biggest triggers lie, and also my biggest blind spots, because I'm not uncomfortable because of what you said. I'm uncomfortable based on how I perceive what you said or perceive what you did. And so therefore, based on my own filters, I'm going to either A, respond, or B, react. And so I've got to now determine which one I'm caught in. Am I reacting to the things in life, or am I responding to the things that are in front of me? And first saying, what is that really? Let me explore it more before I make a decision one way or the other. So for me,
I'm interrupt you. What's your feedback mechanism? Jason, what's your feedback mechanism? In other words, how do you get to this place of objectivity? Do you have a group or men, or do you reflect? How do you get to that place of separating yourself enough to understand that this is going on, and then reacting in one of these two places? What do you do? What do you do?
There are different methodologies, whether it be the community of friends that I share with, close friends that I share with. Hey, I want to run something by you. This is what just took place. And let me give it to you as straight, no chaser as possible, just so that I am delivering it, without inflection one way or the other, because I don't want to lead the witness, if you will. Let me give this to you. And then I want you to tell me, is this something, just based on what you know about me, is this something that I'm being triggered because of my stuff? Or is there something really there that I need to look into a little bit more? And so them knowing me and having seen me for years or what have you, knowing that, okay, well, Jason does have a tendency towards this, and this, or he does overly dissect things, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah, you may want to consider this, Jason. Have you considered this, or this? No, I haven't, or yes, I have. And so based on that back and forth, it's like a ping pong match or tennis match, back and forth, question, answer, to then finally come to the basis of the foundation of a conclusion. And then the next thing is, let me check now with that individual. Hey, I noticed this. Is this what you meant by it? Now, if they tell me no, then I know I've got to go back to the drawing board. Yes.
Jason, just want to interrupt, and people are saying it. Stop moving your head because your microphone is rubbing against your zipper. Thank you.
Okay, good stuff.
That's much better.
Right. Yeah. So that's
go ahead, Glenn.
That's it, right?
Okay,
there,
Glenn.
is that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll move this on, and let's move this because we're moving through time pretty quickly. Let's move to this piece about, so how do we get our objectivity? Jason was saying he has, as intelligent and as well thought out as he has, he still checks in with some people that he trusts, where he can take off his armor and say, look at me as, because I know you care about me, you care about what how I'm showing up in the world, and I trust you to give me some objectivity here because I want to get this right. It's not I'm saying I'm wrong. I want to get this right, right? So, right, is that right, Jason?
That's exactly right.
I have a few trusted people in your life. Dr. Thompson, is this an important piece to you to have men in your lives? Well, it could be women as well, but this is to reinforce a men's community for me on this broadcast. How important is that to really have a few trusted people that have your best interest, to hold your feet to the fire, and call you on your stuff?
I think it's critical, and I'm glad you said that, for me, equally important to have women who are confidants as well, because I think that's part of our learning curve. It's easy for men to affirm each other because we have this understanding. We have this common, I got it. But I think the opportunity to have women in that circle too, who understand you, know where you're going, and support you in the same way, I think that's how that learning curve actually, gets straighter. So I do think it's important. I do it all the time. Hey, Glenn, you're one of those people I call for stuff like that, right? You're on that short list of transparency about where I'm going, and I think that's where it really shows up. Once you have that, I think, as Jason said, you've got to be transparent even in your own circles, and there's a lot of trust that has to be established in that, and I think that trust only grows more and more when you consistently do it.
And Dr. Vibe, is it important for you to have this all sewn up and you have it all locked down and you don't need any counsel from anybody, or do you actually do you have a lock on this thing? What? Can I buy some of that?
Hey, Glenn, last I checked, it took 2 people for me to get into this world, so I'm not messing it up. I'm not trying to do it on my own, brother. I'm telling you, whether I have a high or whether I have a low, I have people I reach out to. And I think it's very important, and especially with the work that you're doing, the work that Glenn's doing, the work that Jason's doing, the work that I'm doing, work that many others are doing in this field, we especially have to make sure that we can cover the lows, that they are taken care of. Because I'll be transparent. I had a disappointment happen to me 2 hours ago. What was the first thing I did? There was someone I could call, one of my inner circle, who I could call, who I could just flush it out. because I've said in our past conversations that there are many men that are screaming and nothing's coming out. And when you can't have that transparency, it eats away at you. It really eats, and all of us have seen men, and probably some of us have gone through it at our times in ourselves. We'll continue to have those moments. We have to make sure that we have those moments when we're not 100%, that you can call up, preferably male, but can be female, saying, you know what, I messed up. You know, so I have those moments, and part of the relief of the transparency that I was looking forward to this to help me through that moment, that I can take the experience I had and use it for fuel. Instead of burning me out, it burns me up hotter.
So let me we're almost over with this program, so let me bring us all. I'll ask all the men on the panel here to send a message to the men and the women that watch. Believe me when I say the strongest men of this world haven't gone alone. We can travel fast alone, but we can travel longer together. That sounds just like a good thing to say, but I'm telling you, if you really want to maintain the next level, the next platform of your life, it doesn't always mean up. That means in strength. That means in resolve. That means in resilience. That means in resourcefulness. Take the risk, men. Get a hold of me, Glenn Barker, or any of the men on this panel. They will direct you to being part of a great council of men that are there to hold each other's feet to the fire, pull us out of the sky with enough to keep us from flying into the sun and out off to the moon, right? But not to inhibit us. And not to give us a pass on those things that will ruin us. My friends do not give me a pass. My friends, the men in my group don't give me a pass. My friends do. My friends and acquaintances give me a pass. The men that I care for, the men that are closest to me, don't.
Powerful.
They care for me too much to give me a pass. All right? So this is Glenn Barker. I'll sign off saying if you want to get a hold of me, I'm with the Mankind Project. I can be reached at 312-243-6743. We'll set up a men's group in your town, in your area. Let's start holding ourselves accountable and making spaces for the men to grow better men of this world. I believe we need them. And I believe we're looking at them here. Thanks for inviting me back on your show, Dr. Vibe.
Anytime. The mic is open. Thanks for always making the conversation, Glenn. And we will chat in the next week or so. We have a lot of catching up to do. So thank you so much, and you take care.
All right, everybody. Bye for now.
It's great meeting you, Glenn.
Good night.
Right.
Talk to you later, Glenn.
You're gone too, Dr. T? You're on your way?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm on my way. I enjoyed it. Sorry for the glitches. We've had electrical storms here all day long today. So I know our internet is going crazy, but hey, we needed it. It is hot as Hades in New Orleans. So we needed to cool off a little bit. We will be in touch.
Right back at you. I'm enjoying your show.
Yeah.
So he's gone. I want to shout out to those people who have joined in: Amnon, Van, Askia Jones, Durham Skywriter, Nikki Nicole, also Afrin DeSantos. I haven't seen you for a while. Hope you're doing okay. That is good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shut down the recording part. We're going to continue the conversation. Before I shut off the recording, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who was on the conversation piece tonight. If you want to touch, Jason, how can people get in touch with you?
They can find me on social, the Jason Hodge. You can go to thejasonhodge.com/connect, I believe. Yeah.
You don't know? You're a social media guy. You don't know?
You know, my client base, they contact me in different ways. So I have it out there, but yeah, I get contacted in different means from my clientele. But yeah, the jasonhodge.com/connect. I do believe that's it.
All right. Well, with me, the easiest way to touch base with me, just go to drvibeshow.com. That's the Dr. Vibe Show. All my contact information is there. Or you can go on to Blab and look me up. I've got more than enough going on Blab and other things. As always, I like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. Stay on for the after show, and we will catch you later on this week because we're doing at least one more conversation about men called Our Father. And that will be with Askia Jones. And I believe the way we're wording is HOUR, not OROUR. Our Father. So please catch it up. Yep, there he goes. Our Father. So that tentatively is tomorrow night at 8 p.m. But just look on Blab, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation. God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. I have hosted and produced over 2,000 epic conversations over the last 10 years. And what makes our conversations epic? We don't do interviews. We do conversations.